Hello, folks. Wow, we're going to hop on here and see how we do today. Welcome to Thorncroft Clematis, and we're looking forward to hopefully having a good few of you on. We want to put this opportunity out here for you to come and ask us questions. Um, we've been really delighted to be involved with the hashtag on Twitter, Clematis Thursday, and we're looking forward to hopefully contributing to that and generating some interest in clematis, but also supporting and helping people with problems, queries, issues they've had with their plants. Not just plants from ourselves, but anybody who's got anything they need help with, support and advice. We want you to be able to get in touch, and yeah, we'll be really pleased to give help and advice here today for an hour. So we're going to try and do this for about an hour each week on a Thursday. Of course, this being our very first try at this, it's going to be interesting for me to see how this works, get used to the system, and yeah, hopefully we'll just get some good feedback, and we'll look at, well, when most people want to take part. So we may change the timing of this question and answer session each week. We may just alter that. We'll have a look at when most people view it, and if there's any feedback on which is sort of the best time to to do this as well. So yeah, so we're looking forward to yeah, everybody getting in touch. I can see Jenny has hopped on there. Hi, Jenny. Great to have you with us, and we'll see what happens. So yeah, what we're going to do is follow through this Q&A session. We'll try and put links to plants or advice into the content section at the bottom of the video title, so that afterwards people will be able to find hopefully whatever it was I was recommending, or what we were talking about, or the plants that have been mentioned as well. So that'll all be done afterwards. We can add that, I think, once this has gone live. Yeah, so there we are. I'll just tell you a little bit about me and who I am and why it's me here answering the questions today. So I'm Peter. I'm third generation in the family business, Thorncroft Clematis, and I'm incredibly thankful that I love what I do. I grew up with these beautiful plants, clematis, surrounding me on the family nursery. I suppose that I was about 5 years old when we moved to Thorncroft, the original Thorncroft nursery. And so, yeah, they were very much around me all of my, youthful life, and that environment was a lovely environment to grow up in. So really terrific. I enjoyed it a great deal, and therefore I think as I was surrounded by the plants, surrounded by, of course, my family, my grandparents and parents, who were talking to customers and advising customers. Even when I was very young, I took in a lot of that information. I soaked it up. I wasn't thinking to myself, I have to learn this or I have to remember this, but it just happened. So I'm very fortunate. I feel very lucky to have a knowledge of these plants, which is some sort of 35 years or so in the making. And hopefully, if that's of help and value to people, then I'd love to be able to pass some of that knowledge on and reassure people who are having difficulties with their plants in the garden. So I've got one or two questions here from people who have had problems with plants recently. So I've had one here from a lady, Valerie, and her plant has grown quite nicely this year, but it's now started to get little sort of black spots against the leaves. And now when you look at the leaf, you can see the veins within the leaf. And if the blackening is within those veins, it's often an indicator of signs of infection, often sort of a fungal infection. Now, in this instance, the spotting is actually across the leaf and across the veins as well, and that is quite indicative of mildew. And now, this last winter here in the UK was very mild, and consequently, this spring, a very damp, very mild spring, we have quite a lot of mildew showing in our gardens already this year. So that's what it is that Valerie has got on her plants. So um, it's not something that's fatal to clematis mildew. It won't actually kill the plant, but what it will do is it will cause a white sort of powdery residue on the leaf. And when that fungus then has died off, and when the spores have gone, it leaves a brownish or blackened mark on it. So it's quite all right to treat a clematis with a good systemic fungicide or contact fungicide. I will post a link in the description of the video later about the best products to use. Of course, we're based in the United Kingdom, so you may, if you're from other parts of the world, need to find something similar, but a good contact fungicide, and if possible, a systemic fungicide to treat that would be a great advantage. If the plant is not too fully covered, you can actually just wipe the stems and the leaves with the damp tissue. A little bit of damp kitchen roll is ideal, and just with some nice clean tap water, just wipe the majority of the white powdery fungus away, and that will hopefully reduce the spread of it. So there we go. That's one. Now we've got here a message from Jenny. Hello, Jenny. And yes, how do we cut them back at the end of a season? Our neighbours don't like them spreading into their garden. Yeah, it's a very good question. Now, pruning does vary depending on the type of clematis you have. But of course, if they are proving problematic to your neighbours, then it's probably as well that we get on top of this and avoid it becoming a problem or continuing to be a problem. Now, a lot of clematis will be pruned in February and March each year. So that's a very good time for doing the pruning for the group 2s and group 3s. So when we prune clematis, we classify them in 3 ways. Group 1 are the clematis that flower on the woody growth from the previous season, and only that growth. Generally, those flower in the winter and spring. Things like the evergreen cirrhoses, the montanas, the alpinas, that sort of group of clematis. Those are group 1s. They flower winter and spring, and we only trim them up and just clip them to keep them tidy. We don't want to prune them very much. So we classify those as group 1. Then we have the large flowered clematis with the big flamboyant blooms, great big flowers the size of your hand. They come out in the UK in about May and June, and those typically are classified as group 2. So those we prune in February, March, and we remove the bulk of the dead growth from the top of the plant down. We take about the top third of the plant away, and we remove the big sort of build-up of dead growth from the top. And then once we've done that in February, March, we trim about 2 weeks later, we go back to the plant and we trim down any remaining dead above the first leaf joint with a shoot in it. All right, we tend to suggest doing that in February, March. Leave them to overwinter with the dead woody growth intact. They do overwinter better if they're left and pruned in February, March. And of course, the last group is the group 3s. Those clematis are the most vigorous, generally speaking, and they flower on the new soft growth they've made during the course of a year. So they will often grow vigorously, and we prune them in February, March, but with these group 3s, we start the pruning by kneeling at the base of the plant and working up the stems. And we look up the woody stem for the first leaf joint that's got a nice bud or a shoot showing in it. And we cut off the dead stem just above that first bud or shoot. So look on the stems, again, knelt at the base of the plant. If you look at the base of the stems, generally where the soil level is, you'll see that the first shoots will appear probably somewhere between 6 and 18 inches from the soil level. And then you can just prune off the stems above those first buds. Of course, there'll be quite a lot of stem up above. You just pull all that out of the support and remove that, and that is the best way of pruning. Again, I'll put a link to our care guide in the description for the video, so you've got all the detailed hints and tips there for that as well. So there we go. And Jenny, yeah, a delightful place to grow up. I was very, very fortunate. I've got a lot of very fond memories of growing up on the nursery with Nanny, Grandad, Mum and Dad, and of course all the lovely staff we had working with us. So many of them, all delightful people. So let's have a look. So Only Me. Hello there, Only Me. Am I too late to cut back a vigorous clematis? I'm not sure of the variety, but it's beautiful. But now it needs a trim. UK-based Lancashire. Hello, Only Me. Well, thanks for hopping on here and for your question. It's never too late, really. It has to be said, the ideal time for some of the most vigorous clematis, the ideal time for pruning is February, March, but we've passed that, so don't worry though. If it is a vigorous clematis, then the likelihood is it will cope with being pruned most of the year without any difficulty. So let's say, for example, it's a Viticella. These are varieties that grow, the Viticella typically grow about 6 to 8, maybe as much as 10 foot of growth in a year. So they're strong, very rapid growers. So it's not a problem to prune now. Indeed, where I was 4th of July, so there's still plenty of nice warm summer to come. Here in the UK, it's been very wet, even now into early summer. We've had a lot of rain recently. So yeah, the ground is moist, there's warmth and plenty of sun to come. I would say go for it. Get on with it and do it. If you knew the variety, it would be helpful to a degree, because then I'd be able to be a little more specific, but of course that's difficult today. But if you want to get in touch, drop me an email on our sales email address. So sales@thorncroftclematis.co.uk. Drop me an email if you've got a picture of your plant. I might be able to identify it for you, and then I can give you the exact pruning type. But yes, go for it. And don't be too afraid. If it's very vigorous and a strong growing plant, it'll cope with it. Perhaps just apologise to it for having been harsh. Give it a bit of bone meal onto the soil just around the base of the stems. Wriggle that in, perhaps water it down, and that will help strengthen the root and encourage new root growth. Once the root is happy and strong, that will enable the clematis to reshoot, regrow, and flourish for you. All right, I hope that's helpful. So do get on and go for that. That'll be absolutely fine. So pleasure, Jenny. You're most welcome. I gave a very, very quick pruning guide there, but I'm glad that was useful. There we are, and you're welcome, Only Me. I often say to people, yeah, if you're afraid about pruning, I often say to people, don't be alarmed, because if I were to prune your clematis for you, I'd probably prune them a lot harder than you would. And if it makes you feel better, just tell the plant Peter said so before you do it. Just say, no, I don't want to do this, but Peter told me I've got to do this. All right, I've got broad shoulders, I can take it. They're fine. So yes, so Paul Fargis, Jenny, so very bushy, flowering, can I trim it? You can, if it's full with bloom or lots of bud still to come, then I'd generally say tie it back or tie it in a bit if you can, and just enjoy those blooms. Whilst they're in full flower and they've got a lot of bud on them, they are undergoing a point of stress. So there's a lot of stress on the infrastructure of the plant, both the foliage, the stems, and of course on the roots of the plant as well. So you can trim it. Again, Paul Farges is a very vigorous clematis. It's also known as summer snow in some countries, and Fargesioides is another popular synonym for that plant. It is vigorous, it is strong, it can take it, but at the same time, when we make cuts into the stems of a plant, it does open that stem up to potential infection. So whilst they're in bud and flower, it's nice if we can perhaps tie back growth that may be in the way, because that perhaps would be less stressful for the clematis, and you can always then get on top of the pruning for that again next spring. All right. So yeah, summer snow, very appropriate name for Paul Farges. Yeah, it's a lovely, lovely thing. Quite stunning when it's in full bloom. It really is. And only me, when is the best time to buy clematis? So, on the whole, with our climate in the UK, you can plant pretty much year round. Because the quality of plant that, for example, we supply, those are 2-year-old minimum, and they're in at least a 2-litre pot. So they're well-established plants that are garden ready, so you can plant year round. I would say that it is planting time is really dictated by your soil type. What I mean by that is that if you have, for example, like I have here, a very heavy clay soil, and because of that, I wouldn't plant until probably late March, early April, through to about the end of May, because if I were to plant on my heavy clay ground during the autumn, then I know that my new plants are going to be sitting very wet in a heavy, damp soil all winter long, and that can be bad for the roots. So I would plant on a heavy soil. I will plant in spring and up to early summer. And if you've got a light sandy soil, so my parents' house is only a mile away, very light sandy ground, incredibly free draining, they would plant in the late summer and autumn. Usually I'd suggest about sort of September, October into November. That's a great time for planting on sandy, free draining grounds, because the root won't sit wet or waterlogged, and indeed the ground keeps warm well into the autumn, and they'll develop a good strong root before flowering then the following year nice and strongly. So yeah, dependent on soil type a little bit. Availability often has a lot to do with your planting times. Availability from people like ourselves tends to be highest in around February, March, April, that sort of time of year. We have the greatest selection of varieties at that time. But then, of course, there are some varieties, more specialist varieties, for example, some of the smaller species that perhaps only come into bloom in midsummer. Things like the Tangutica, those are lovely clematis, very fine rooted, long summer flowering. So plants like Lambton Park and Tibetainer Orange Peel, Bill Mackenzie, they're wonderful things. And they're quite all right to plant year round. So there we are. Hopefully that's a help. Jenny, you're off to tie it back now. Good, good, good. Have a good day to you too. Only me. It's a little cheeky. What do you think of? What do you think of clematis from supermarkets? I would of course purchase from yourselves. Thank you, only me. I'll have most variety and best quality supermarket. Yeah. Supermarket plants. It does depend. It varies a great deal. Some we see in quite a good sized pot. So some actually have quite a good sized root system and are okay. We do, however, see a lot of supermarkets selling little, what we call a liner pot. And this is usually about a 9 centimetre pot and a pretty little sort of cellophane wrapper. And the whole thing might stand 18 to 20 inches tall, sort of thing. That's what we call a liner. That's the sort of plant we would pot into a 3 litre container and then grow on for another 18 months before selling it. So they are very young and they're fine to buy, but I always say to people, if you bought from a supermarket one of these little ones that's in a pot, let's say the size of a coffee cup, if you've bought one of those, it needs to be potted into a larger container, something about sort of 2 to 3 litres in volume, and plotted into that container with a bamboo cane. It would need to be grown in that really for about 1 year before planting out into the garden. I tend to say grow them in a sunny situation or in a greenhouse, or a polytunnel if you've got a small polytunnel. Pop them into those, grow them on for about a year before planting out into the garden, to allow their roots to establish and develop really well before they go out into the big wide world. They are very tempting, and yeah, it's often, I mean, you see 3 for a tenner sometimes, and I I can't deny anybody seeing that and thinking, oh, bargain opportunity. If you want to buy them that way, that's absolutely fine. But do just grow them on for a while to make sure they're well established before they go into the garden. And then there'll be much better plants for you. All right. Super duper. So there we are. And let's have a look at another here. I had another query. Someone had asked. Yes, we've got a plant that had been left in a package for a little while. It had been delivered to somebody, they'd had it delivered from us, and been left in its package for a short while before they got around to planting it. Yeah, great shame. That can happen. You can sign for something, stand it outside and think to yourself, yeah, I'll plant that later. And this person's left it for a couple of days. Thankfully, it will be okay. They've unpacked it. The plant's actually fine. So it's been in the box for about 6 days. Delivered to them within 48 hours from ourselves, but then yes, not unboxed, so it's fine, it'll be okay. It's had a really good drink, and what I've advised they do is just prune the plant back by about half to reduce the amount of stem and infrastructure the root has to sustain. By doing that, we'll just reduce the stress on the root system of the clematis. Indeed, a lot of clematis growers will recommend that you prune your clematis back by half when you put it into the garden and when you plant it into the ground. It's not a bad thing to do, not something we generally say is necessary. So in our care guide and our planting and pruning advice, it will suggest you prune the plant hard back the first year after planting. So the details of that will be in the printed care guide you get in your package from us. Some places though, they do say prune it back when you plant it, and that will encourage it to settle in and reshoot and so on, which is absolutely fine. And that is actually what I'm going to suggest to this customer who has had this plant delivered and yes, not unpacked it for a few days. So there we go. So that can be done. That's absolutely fine. Now, somebody else has been in touch with Judy, and she has a clematis which has sadly contracted mildew. Now, I mentioned mildew earlier, and that I put a list of appropriate treatments in, but I've kept Judy's email to one side because she has a preference not to use sprays in her garden. So that is, of course, pesticides or fungicides, and she has a recommendation here for a home product with less harmful ingredients. So she says to combine a tablespoon of baking soda, half a teaspoon of liquid, so presumably just water, a non-detergent soap. Ah, that's what it is. And then I put that into a gallon of water. So a tablespoon of baking soda and 1/2 teaspoon of non-detergent liquid soap. And mix that into a gallon of water and spray that liberally onto the plants. That was her recipe, her homebrew recipe for mildew treatment on her clematis. So there you are. I thought that could be helpful for people to have that note as well. Now, another issue that we've seen a lot of this spring, and we've seen this not only from our own customers, but in our Thorncroft advice page on Facebook. So if you can't make a Thursday and come to this Q&A session on a Thursday, don't worry. If you hop onto Facebook and search up Thorncroft Clematis Advice Group, you can hop on there, become a member of our advice group and get hints, help and advice anytime. So one of the things we've seen a lot of this year is people with their clematis suffering from slug and snail damage. Now, slug and snail damage is very prevalent this year. It's difficult sometimes to spot if you don't know what you're looking for. Now, on a clematis, slugs and snails will rarely sever the stems through. They don't actually cut the stems through and separate them. What they do is they run their teeth up the bark of the clematis and they strip off the outer brown woody bark. And they want the soft cambium underneath. That's what they want. So they're stripping the brown bark off to get to the soft cambium layer underneath, and they're eating that. And if they do that enough on the stem, it will cause the growth above that damaged area to die off and look like clematis wilt. So you can sometimes have a clematis which is looking happy, and indeed somebody sent a picture the other day of Princess Diana. It had clearly been beautiful, a good 6 or 7 foot high upper fence panel in abundant growth and lots of flower on it. And only a couple of weeks later, half of the plant was starting to die back. Some of the stems in amongst the green growth were starting to look poor and brown and dying off. And I said, I think that's slug and snail damage. And indeed, they came back to me on the email and said, you're absolutely right. What you've described is very apparent low down on my plant, and I can see where the damage is occurring. And so there we are. Slugs and snails don't cut the stems through, they don't sever the stem, they just strip the bark on the side of the stem. And if they do that enough, it will cause the growth above that damage to die back. So what can we do? Well, the best thing to do is take a nice sharp pair of scissors and cut out the dead stems. And then, of course, to try and prevent further damage from slugs and snails. So there are lots of different options you can use for control of slugs and snails. Many preferences on both using or avoiding slug or snail pellets. You have to take your own preference on that. If you want to avoid using slug and snail pellets, that's fine. Then use a good coarse mulch, not something heavy. I try to dissuade people from using pebbles or crocks, or indeed gravel or slate, because these are all quite heavy and can compact the soil at the base of the plant. So instead, use a more abrasive but lightweight mulch. If you want to use an ornamental mulch, use something like bark chippings, and you can get really sort of thick, big chunked bark. It's often called play grade, I think they call it, a very chunky bark chipping. It's lightweight. It's very effective at discouraging slugs and snails because they don't like the abrasive surface of bark chippings. And a good thick layer of that will also shade the soil and keep the roots of your clematis cool and moist as well. Okay, so we've got Ali from Ali Blackburn. Hi, Ali. Thanks for joining us. Planted a new roller coaster clematis. Did water it, forgot it for a few days, and it's shriveled. Will it survive? Hope the roots have taken. Yeah, I hope so, Ali. Don't worry too much. We're seeing, again, we've had a few inquiries where people have had clematis have really got away quickly and all of a sudden died back. And that this spring is happening with established plants as well as new ones. And indeed, largely speaking, if they die back with a sort of brownish effect to the leaf and it goes crisp, that usually is a sign of physical damage. If they've gone blackened and then limp, that can be infection, which is more of a concern. But whichever it might be, essentially the treatment's the same. Cut down the affected growth, cut back the bits that have shriveled. And if there's any healthy growth lower down, just cut the dead off and leave the healthy bits. If there's nothing obvious, if it looks like the whole stem has died back right to the soil, then leave just about 6 or 8 inches of stem above the ground, just in case it shoots out from that woody part. Whilst it's done that, it's not using a lot of water at the moment. So when the clematis has died back like this, although we may not be aware of why it's died back, we do know that it doesn't have a lot of need for much water. So don't overdo the watering, because we don't want the root to sit waterlogged, and we could end up damaging that if we're not careful. Okay, Ali, you're most welcome. Pleasure, pleasure. So yeah, what was this? Only mate, I actually have a wasp nest in your shed this year. Heavens, only a small one. I've noticed I have no green fly or black fly anywhere this year, so I don't want to destroy the nest. How about that? Well, only me. Yes, you're right. These wasps can indeed be beneficial. Indeed, in commercial environments such as we have, there are various different breeds of wasp. Of course, there are hundreds, probably thousands of different breeds of wasp. And there are some types of wasp that are tiny, tiny little things. You would hardly recognize them as being a wasp, but they are a wasp, and they're actually used as a beneficial insect. So in commercial environment, these days we try to use beneficial insects as opposed to using too many pesticides. And wasps can indeed be very beneficial in the garden. There we are. It could well be just a common wasp, but nevertheless, they will indeed feed on other pests, what to us are pests in the garden. So those, anything, black fly, green fly, and other aphids, they'll happily eat those up. Yes, another insect that can be used and is used in the greenhouse is the humble and dainty ladybird. So the ladybird's actually very helpful, and before the ladybird is fully grown in its larvae stage, is superb because they eat a lot of aphid. So in the nursery environment, again, ladybird's actually a very helpful, beneficial insect for us. So there we go. One thing that I found interesting lately was that looking at slugs and snails, which again customers have reported being a problem in their gardens this year, is I've noticed that the RHS, the Royal Horticultural Society, they have altered their website and their advice about slugs and snails. It's actually very difficult on their website to find any recommendation for an actual pesticide control method for slugs and snails. And I can understand why they've done that, because indeed slugs and snails are an important part of the garden environment, because they help to break down dead leaf matter and turn that dead leaf matter and material into soil for us. So I can understand why they've done that. It's frustrating as a gardener and as a nurseryman in some ways. You want to have a resource where you can say, right, have a look at this, because the RHS, they keep their website up to date very frequently, and the information they have is always so helpful. But it struck me as being something, yes, quite unusual to see how difficult it was to find any information on their website about slug and snail control. Yes, lots of interesting suggestions on how you could go out at night and find them and move them to a less problematic area of the garden. I don't know how many people will be doing that, but there we are. I think probably people will revert to using things like beer traps if they don't want to use pesticides or slug or snail pellets. I myself won't be going out with a pot and tracking down slugs and snails late at night. So there we are. Anyhow, that's covered quite a bit there. So yes, I'm hoping that Clematis Thursday, this is a hashtag that was started by John Norman, who is a friend on Twitter. So John Norman Garden Designs, he started a hashtag Clematis Thursday on Twitter, and it's become really popular. Has such a good following now, and it struck me that yes, sometimes it would perhaps be useful for people to have a time or a place they could come to on a Thursday to sort of participate in a Q&A session to get those little bits of advice, questions answered, and could be useful for us as well. Because like I say, we get contacted by people who've got plants from us, they've had plants perhaps years ago, maybe they've moved to a new property and they've got a clematis in the garden, they don't know what to do with it. And of course, email and phone is always a pleasure to speak to our customers and to help. I love passing on my knowledge, but the opportunity to actually interact with people and see the questions come in the chat and be able to answer you directly, and for these videos to stay out there and available for people to see at a later date, is going to be a useful resource. So I hope that proves to be correct assumption. So I'm going to try and keep it to about an hour, and we're going to do it each week. We'll see how it goes for a few weeks, and hopefully we'll pick up some traction, and it'll be great to interact with all of you, whether you're regular, returning guests and contributors, Jenny, Bowie, and only me, and Ali, if you're coming back again, that's always a pleasure. Let us know how you got on, and if the advice I gave was effective. That's always nice to know. If what we've suggested has worked, that's always good. I'll probably get used to looking at the camera rather than at the comments down here, but there you go. That's just me getting used to the technology as well. I was doing this today on my larger iMac computer so that I can easily see the comments, but I'm aware that yes, the comments come in down here and the camera's up there, so I'll have to just practice that. So yeah, anyhow, it's been a real pleasure to to be in touch with you today. Okay, yeah, only me. I did miss your other question. What medium should I use with a potted clematis? Yeah, that's a super question. So if we were potting, for example, an established clematis, so a 2-year-old plant, such as you buy from ourselves, into a larger container, so it's final pot. Let's assume you're growing something in a large patio container, about 18 inches diameter and a similar depth. So you would pot into that usually a mixture of 3 parts John Innes number 3. So that's a loam-based compost. So again, we're talking about UK, the UK here. So John Innes is a well-known formula that is used in composts. And if you can actually get the original, the authentic John Innes number 3, that is a loam-based compost for trees and shrubs. And clematis we classify as a tree and a shrub. And we use 3 parts John Innes number 3 and 1 part multi-purpose compost. And that could be peat-based, or it can be a peat substitute if you prefer. That's absolutely fine. So yeah, 3 parts John Innes number 3, 1 part multi-purpose. That can be peat-based or peat substitute if you prefer. Doesn't matter. Mix that well. And when you actually go to put the clematis into the container, just dig out a little well or a spot where the root ball is going to go. But just before you put the roots of the clematis in, put a small handful of bone meal into the hole. Just wriggle it into the immediate area where the clematis root's going to be placed. And then as you place the clematis root in, you can just push that soil or composter back around it, and that will just fill up and close up any air pockets. I suggest that you don't compact compost around the root too densely. When you pot a clematis, pot it and tap the container and then water it down and water it in. If the compost level settles over 24 hours and you find you need to top it up, then you can do so. You can top it up with a bit more. I suggest that's better for your clematis than potting it and sort of forcing the compost in around the root. If you force it in around the root, you can compact it, and then the root will struggle to push through a heavily compacted compost. So yes, that's a little tip for you as well. Prepare the compost, pot the clematis with a bit of bone meal around the root, and then water it in well. Keep a bit of compost back, so if you need and it settles, you can top it up at a later date. All right, there we go. We're doing well so far. Goody good, excellent. And hopefully you can hear me all right. The microphone is working okay, because you're obviously getting my answers. So that's that's super. Yeah. So that's a pleasure, Only Me. You're very welcome. Yeah. What else was I going to say? I haven't done any update videos on YouTube for quite a while. It's yeah, one thing and another. We've just been really busy, which is great. We're a team of only 4 people. We've got Heather, who runs the nursery itself, Gertie, her trusty right-hand lady. They do a wonderful job. Marianne, of course, as well, who is incredibly diligent and kind and helpful. She's also, if you came to some plant fairs and flower shows, you'll have seen us all together. Marianne was with me at Spetchley Park this spring. Lovely little plant fair, really enjoyable. And of course, the Malvern Spring Flower Festival, which we love going to. And this year we got our first gold medal at the Malvern Spring Festival, which was great because we've had gold medals at all the other RHS venues we've been to, including 12 at Chelsea, which is fantastic. But we'd never had a gold medal at Malvern. So it was really lovely to achieve the gold there, and all of the team were involved in putting those display pots together. So everyone had a go, everyone had an input, and being only 4 people, yeah, it means all the more when you get that gong, when you get that gold medal. So it was an absolutely super show. Yeah, we really enjoyed it, and it was super to see lots of you, our customers, coming over and saying hello. And yeah, it really does make such a difference. We do like the face to face. We like to, yeah, we like to be interacting with people. So yeah, it was a really good show. Okay, so we're coming up on sort of 45 minutes or so. I'm just going to just have a quick look here at the other questions. Bear with me. And we had here a David, yeah, and he was looking for a couple of clematis to grow between 3 and 4 foot and group 3s. So that's a hard prune clematis for 3 to 4 foot that could go in shade, partial shade. So let's have a quick look. We've quite a lot of clematis that are actually really very good shade tolerant plants. And the nice thing is that on our website these days you're able to go to a special area. At the top you'll see a clematis selection made easy. So find us out at thorncroftclematis.co.uk, and at the top of the web page you'll find clematis selection made easy, and then tolerant is an option within that category. And you can then use the filters on the left hand side of the page to filter down the different options and see what's available. A really helpful feature of the website. And so we can then find varieties which are, and we'll use the filter to put in 3 to 4 foot, and we can then suggest for David a number of plants that will be really good. If we select 3 and 4 foot, that gives us 11 varieties that could be chosen, which will be suitable for shade and only grow 3 to 4 foot. So the Duchess of Cornwall, beautiful, stunning violet blue flower, with maturing to mid-blue as the flower ages, and it's a good variety, even in part. It'll actually grow happily on any aspect. It doesn't mind which way it faces. It's fine in the sun, and it's also fine in the shade. Very prolific, free-flowering plant. And another of my absolute favourites is Clematis Ooh La La. Ooh La La. It's a fantastic clematis from Raymond Everson. And I saw this when it was very first introduced, actually. There was a special flower show that took place at the Inner Temple Gardens in London, and Raymond Everson was there exhibiting along with ourselves and many other exhibitors as well. And that was the first time I saw Clematis Ooh La La, and it is an absolute beauty. As in a compact, prolific variety, is striking pink with a deeper, vibrant pink bar down the middle. It certainly is eye-catching. So the name Ooh La La really is very appropriate. Superb for part shade to a shady aspect, and yeah, only grows to about 3 foot during the course of a year. And those are group 3 hard prune time. So there we are. I shall be dropping that note down to David in a few minutes. And don't worry, only me. It's fantastic to have you here. You can take over the chat section all you like. And you like Ooh La La, you've just looked her up. Oh, yeah, it's a cracker. It really is a cracker. So, yeah, I'm glad you like her too. And I said that it's one of my favourites because, of course, being a nurseryman, it's rather unfair of anybody to ask which is your actual favourite. I think, in all honesty, I've got one favourite. There's no one particular plant I could say, oh, I don't know. But then again, yes, there is one. There is one, which if I could only take one clematis with me somewhere, it would have to be Fond Memories. And Fond Memories, the reason it's so important to me was that it was bred by my grandfather, or I should say it was discovered by my grandfather. He had, gosh, back in the early 90s, we had one polytunnel which was dedicated to show stock and stock plants. So this was plants going to flower shows and plants for taking cuttings from. And in that tunnel of, I don't know, 300 or more large mature plants, he spotted a Clematis floridus seboldiana. Now, if you know Floridus seboldiana, you'll be familiar that it has a dense purple centre, with spiky centre, and it's sterile. It doesn't usually set seed. But he noticed one flower head, just one flower head, on this one plant in a whole polytunnel. And he noticed that it had set seed, which was very unusual, very, very rare to see. And so he harvested that seed and he set that seed. And from that one seed head, we now have 3 new varieties of clematis. The most popular, Fond Memories, was introduced in well, no, it was seed in 1996, introduced in 2001, I think it was, and is now grown worldwide. And it's such a privilege to see, you know, my granddad's plant grown across the globe. It's lovely. Yeah, it really is. So gorgeous. Yeah, gorgeous clematis. If I had to pick one and only one, that would be the one I'd take. But there are so many. Ooh la la. Does it like windy conditions? Ooh la la will cope with windy conditions quite well because it's not a huge flower. It's not a flower that gets massive in size, so it doesn't damage too easily. So bloom on that's probably about 3.5 to 4 inches across, maybe 4.5 inches at the largest. So yeah, that will be no big problem. It's not going to grow terribly tall, no more than 4 foot if it is hard pruned each year, and it is a group 3 type, so you do tend to cut it quite hard, and that's how it keeps compact, and as such it's relatively low down, and therefore it'll be typically out of the wind. But yeah, it's not a problem to grow that in the wind. So there we go. Yeah, so there we go. Lovely. Well, there. Oh, well, I'm so glad. I think this has worked quite well so far. Anyway, we've had just 4 of us on today, but it's been really good for you to come in and contribute. Thank you so much for your questions. We're going to reconvene next week. Like I say, I'm going to have a look at the sort of metrics of the video once it's complete, and we'll see, you know, when it was most viewed, what time of day it was most viewed. Obviously, we're a UK-based company, and probably, I think it's fair to say that the Twitter group and hashtag Clematis Thursday, which is where this all originated from, I think that's largely sort of European-based. That's a generalization, but I think it is. So we'll probably keep it to an afternoon, a sort of a Thursday afternoon, I think. So yeah, there we are. That's a pleasure, Only Me. You're very welcome. Yeah, big thumbs up to everybody. And yeah, I've not done many update videos on YouTube this year, which is a shame. The other reason is just that one of the things that we tended to do was post videos of the flower show exhibits. We only did Malvern Spring Festival this year. Other than that, it's been a fairly sort of steady year of you know, pushing on promotions, pushing on to different events. Just not actually been too many places to make much content, I'm afraid. I do have these videos, these Clematis Thursday videos. I'm going to put those as probably their own playlist. But there is another playlist called In the Workshop, where I sort of take people's questions and then answer them on there. I think probably that never really got going. It's just difficult for me to have available. I didn't ever find a good way of having all the questions and things to hand to then film the answers. I never really got on top of that, but I think perhaps this is the answer. So I hope it is anyway. Yeah, so there we go. So that's what we're going to do, and I think yeah, we probably won't. I probably won't keep hanging on just to complete an hour, but well, I'm going to sort of nominally say that it'll be a 1-hour Q&A each Thursday. So we'll be back next Thursday, and yeah, thank you, Only Me. We'll see, and yeah, I'm sure we'll pick up more viewers. And of course, it was a very short sort of notice of doing this time. But it's great to have this one video out here, and then we will, yeah, we'll pick it up, I'm sure. And I'll try and find a more florally interesting place in which to video it. Yeah, you've got my nice calendar on the background, but yeah, we'll try and find you a better background, a better location to sit and do these. Maybe outside in the garden, in front of a clematis. We'll see. Anyhow, folks, it's been great to have you here. Thanks ever so much for coming and joining us. And well, we'll see you again in the comments. And if you have any other questions, get in touch with us, Thorncroft Clematis Advice Group on Facebook. Drop us an email, sales@thorncroftclematis.co.uk. And if you want to buy us a coffee, you can do that. Link in the bio. Thanks ever so much. Hope you've enjoyed it. See you again.